I'd like now to introduce Lisa Longstaff from Women Against Rape. Women Against Rape was founded in 1976, and it works with survivors of all kinds of abuse to demand protection, justice, compensation, and asylum. Thank you, Lisa.
So I wanted to tell people who are visitors here that there's been an outpouring from survivors of rape since 2012, when it became known a celebrity called Jimmy Savile, who was involved in loads of charities, hospitals and prisons, and a celebrity on TV, had sexually assaulted hundreds of girls in each of these institutions. And he was very tied up with the government and the royal family. The authorities have finally admitted to prejudice about the character and behaviours of victims of rape rather than our attackers. They have said, you know, come forward and you will be believed. They've been judging us, especially if we're sex workers, children in care, if we're mentally ill, if we've had drink or drugs, if we're particularly young, if we're disabled, if we have a criminal record, if we're asylum seekers. In fact, there are a lot of the same vulnerabilities that are picked on by rapists. Surprise. There's been an outpouring of survivors, rape as adults and as children, and of domestic violence survivors. The reports have shot up. Last week, an official report said that in 2014-15, nearly 20,000 rapes were recorded. That's double those in 2010 and 11. But the conviction rate has fallen from 6% to less than 4%. Now, they don't publish that bit, the conviction rate. We have fought for many years to establish what the conviction rate is, but the figures have now been covered up. So some figures come out, the other end of it, what is the conviction rate, never appears. It doesn't even include those who are not crimed, not recorded as a crime by the police, and it doesn't include the thousands of women who suffer without coming forward to the authorities at all. But we can't tell people don't go to the police. When you're in a crisis, you call the police. I'm glad we're having that discussion because it's something that comes up a lot, and we really need to, you know, thrash it out among ourselves. The police claim that victims just want to be listened to be believed and access services. Well, no, we don't. We want justice. We want compensation for the pain that we've suffered, and we want to stop those people. We want to stop those people harming other women and girls like ourselves and boys and other men. The movement against child rape is particularly massive, but we have a lot of problems that we urgently need to address together. Survivors have been carved up by the authorities. Domestic violence, child abuse, we think they should be calling it child rape, and that's another debate that's going on. It's never connected. It's never connected with the rape of adults. Even adults who've been raped as children are separated from women raped as adults. They're dealt with even by different teams of police. They're even investigated separately, even when the same person has suffered all three forms of the crime. And I'm glad you said, you know, we have to connect with other people who've been at the hands of police violence. These are the same police who covered up what happened at Hillsborough and blamed the fans for, you know, crimes that were committed against them by the police and the ambulance who didn't respond properly, and who beat up the miners at Orgreave under Margaret Thatcher. And we're very aware of they're killing people, black people in particular, in police custody. Rape is not a priority for the police. They go on and on about terrorism, but what about the terrorism that women suffer daily with domestic violence? 2 women every week are killed by their partner or ex-partner in this country, even when the police have been called. Now, sometimes those police officers get identified, but they're never sacked, let alone prosecuted. In 90 cases we've looked at, only 1 officer was ever sacked. Adults who were raped as kids have accused people in the military, in the government, secret services, social workers, police, as well as people in their own families. but the authorities are still covering it up. In Rotherham, 1,400 girls in kids' homes were raped by adults over a period of 10 years, and that's happened all up and down the country in every town and city. But when they reported it, many of them were prosecuted themselves for minor crimes like underage drinking. The police are involved in some of this crime, but nobody is pointing the finger at them. Are they taking money from some of these rapists? There are now 14 investigations by the Independent Police Complaints Authority of officers closing down investigations when more junior officers got too close to authority. We need more whistleblowers, as has been said. The official reaction to this outpouring about abuse as children, rape as children, is to have a public inquiry. We think that's going to be another cover-up. It might conclude that some institutions have failed people and lessons will be learned, as we keep hearing the old cliche. But actually, who is going to be held to account and prosecuted? Another state response is to misuse our justifiable anger to justify general repression in the name of women's safety, and we're sick to death of this. They're sending women and kids to prison after domestic violence and rape for so-called false allegations, for retaliating against our attackers, or mental health hospital, as we've been hearing. And I must say, the wrong people are in jail. Why aren't the rapists in jail instead of the poor people, the black people, the people with mental illness? Not that I support jails, but let's put those people in while we have them. After women have suffered domestic violence, a lot of our kids are being taken into care, into state institutions, many to be raped again. There's an adoption industry, which we heard about yesterday from Pat Gowans. I'm glad she called it child trafficking. They're taking women's children who are poor and giving them to middle-class people in the name of safety. In Soho, where there was a red light area, the 150 officers raided, and that was in the name of saving trafficked women. A teenage boy was recently prosecuted and labelled a sex offender for having a naked photograph of himself on his own mobile phone. There's been hugely more violence under the austerity cuts, welfare cuts, housing, legal aid, refugees. They're no longer a service but forced to compete on the housing market. A woman was raped by her father, who we worked with, suffering persistent trauma and can't function in daily life, still expected to look for work, claimed employment support allowance for disability, mental health problems. They took 12 weeks to decide. They told her, no, you're getting nothing, we're not paying your rent either. Next day she got a text saying, oh, sorry, it was a mistake. Why don't we hear about this stuff or make connections among our different movements? The Metropolitan Police has a PR budget of £10 million. NGOs and voluntary organisations say they can't campaign because of their charitable funding. A lot of funding is now tied up with the Home Office, the police, the Ministry of Justice. How can they claim to be independent? And just one last point on the issues that came up earlier about the police. Caddy said that the family of one of the police officers who killed her brother reported him after that for being violent to them. Well, how many police officers have been violent within their own families and go on and are doing it in the community? And the same point goes for mental health. If the injustices of racism, rape, poverty and other things were dealt with at the time in the first place, there'd be less people in mental institutions and in trouble.